All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about something pretty wild, one of the most audacious things humans have ever done. We're not talking about discovering new land, we're talking about building it, literally from scratch. So let's just kick things off with a crazy thought. What if you could just, you know, make more land? I don't mean find it, I mean build it. Like take a swamp that's good for nothing, or even a piece of the ocean, and turn it into a place where people can actually live and farm. And believe it or not, this isn't science fiction. It's a real process called land reclamation. Basically, it's this incredible feat of engineering where you turn totally useless areas into valuable land. And today, we're going to dive into two super different but equally amazing examples of how it's actually done. Okay, first up, let's head over to Kenya, right into the heart of the country, to see how they took on a big challenge, not with the sea, but inland. So the big problem here wasn't the ocean. It was these huge stretches of land, swampy, semi-arid stuff that you just couldn't farm. And in a country where agriculture is everything, well, that's a massive roadblock for feeding people and building communities. So to tackle this head-on, the government kicked off something called the Mwea Tabera Irrigation Scheme. And look, the goals here were super clear and really ambitious. This wasn't just about growing crops, no. This was a huge social and economic project. The idea was to give land, create jobs, and build a future for folks who had been displaced or had no land of their own. And what did they decide to grow? Rice. It was genius, really. By cleverly diverting water from the nearby Thiba and Yamindi rivers, they managed to turn this really tough landscape into a booming hub for growing food. So how'd they do it? Well, they used two main methods, and both were just brilliantly effective. And we're not talking about super high-tech stuff here, just really smart engineering. It was mostly about digging canals and ditches. You could either flood a whole field for the rice, that's called basin irrigation, or you could guide the water down these little channels between the crops. So simple, but absolutely transformative. Okay, so reclaiming a swamp, that's seriously impressive, right? But what if your problem wasn't just a swamp? What if you were up against the North Atlantic Ocean itself? And for that, we've got to go to the Netherlands. Here, the opponent is literally the sea. I mean, a huge chunk of this country is actually below sea level. For centuries, its people have been locked in this constant, epic battle against the water. And their solution? It's legendary. It's called a polder. So what is a polder? Well, put simply, it's a piece of land that used to be the bottom of the sea, which is now walled off and kept dry by these massive barriers called dikes. Now, making a polder, it's not as simple as just building a wall. Oh no, it is a massive step-by-step engineering marvel. First, you got to build a huge dike to wall off a section of the sea. Then you pump all the water out, but you're not done. After that, you start this long process of getting all the salt out of the soil so things can actually grow. And here's the kicker. The pumping has to keep going, forever, and never ever stops. And we are not talking about a small-time operation here. This was a national effort on an epic scale. Think of huge projects like the Zuider Zeeworks and the Delta Plan. These didn't just create a few extra farm fields. They literally redrew the map of the Netherlands. So there you have it. Two totally different stories, right? You've got Kenya battling inland swamps and the Netherlands taking on the sea itself. But underneath it all, they share the exact same fundamental goal: make new land for people to use. And when you put them side by side, the contrast is just fascinating. In Kenya, they use simpler, much less expensive methods to reclaim relatively small areas of swamp. But the Netherlands, facing the raw power of the ocean, they had no choice but to use super advanced, incredibly expensive technology to claim huge, huge areas of land. But here's the thing. Despite all those differences, the environment, the tech, the sheer scale of it all, the reason for doing it was exactly the same. The core motivation was to create new land for people to live on and for people to grow food. So what's the big takeaway here? What can we learn from these incredible stories of human ingenuity and just, well, sheer stubbornness? I think it's a really powerful story about our ability to adapt, It shows how completely different societies, facing different challenges with totally different resources, can figure out how to overcome these massive environmental hurdles. And not just to survive, but to actually thrive and build a more secure future for themselves. And that leaves us with a pretty big question for our own future, doesn't it? As we're looking at rising sea levels and coastlines that are changing right before our eyes, the lessons from both the Kenyan plains and the Dutch polders, well, they've never felt more relevant. The question really isn't if we can reshape our world anymore. We know we can. The real question is, when and how will we choose to do it again?